Thank you, everyone. So my name is Tiwonge Mzumara-Gawa. I am a lecturer at the Malawi University of Science and Technology, and I'm an ecologist by training. My special field is birds, but in Malawi, usually you get to work with a lot of other things as well, apart from what you maybe have specialized in. So in the study I'll be sharing with you today, I got the opportunity to also work with some incredible people who do insects and look at that. So I'll be sharing with you today this work, which is work in progress, because I think we've started this work last year and have just collected the first season data for this. And as you know, last year in Malawi, there was Cyclone Freddy, so our data collection didn't go as we planned. So we're still looking to go out in the field hopefully this year or maybe early next year to collect some information, and then we'll do some analysis. So what I'll be sharing is really preliminary findings of just running and looking at the information that we got last year and haven't done any hardcore analysis. And I'm hoping the people that are attending today will also give us some ideas about how we can explore the data that we have. So this work was about birds and insects in macadamia orchards and the surrounding systems. This was part of the FSNet fellowship, where I was the fellow, and I had Professor Onango from Kenya as one of my mentors, Dr. Steve Said at the University of Leeds, and Dr. Abdullah Yusuf at the University of Pretoria, who are still working with me on this project. So why birds and insects? Obviously, at least from our policies in Malawi, we see that the focus when it comes to farmers of crops, both subsistence and commercial crops, the focus when it comes to birds and insects is for their role as pests in these systems than their role as pest predators or as pollinators, which we know are important as well. So I think for me, I've always worked on birds in the forest and mountains and things like that, on their ecological roles and the like. This was an opportunity for me to really do something that is related to what my country is very interested in, and which is agriculture. And we said, okay, let's look at the role of birds as pest predators, but also because my team had a lot of people that are entomologists. I said, well, when you're doing that, why can't we also look at insects? And when we look at the report that IPBES had on pollination, it has in there that 3/4 of the leading types of global food crops, they do rely on animal pollination. And I think, for example, in Malawi, there hasn't been much really done to understand, what those animals are and what it is that they're doing. So because there is limited knowledge, I think that also limits the amount of information about these things that can go in our policies. So maybe our agriculture schools are not teaching our agriculture extension workers about birds as predators or as pollinators, because the information isn't there for them to put in these kind of curricula or policy documents about that. At the same time, we know that for many, many crops, there's a huge rise of pesticides. And in my country now, the regulation of these pesticides is very minimal. There's a lot of things that come in and are being used that haven't actually been approved. Why macadamia orchards in particular? Well, because Malawi was largely a tobacco exporter, and now tobacco is not doing very well. And our strategy, one of the strategy options, is that macadamia should be encouraged, and more farmers who are doing tobacco should consider moving to macadamia, because it's potential replacement of tobacco as an export. At the moment, macadamia counts for about 3.1% of our country's exports, and Malawi is the 7th global exporter in the world for macadamia. And about a quarter of these exports in Malawi are from smallholder farmers. And I think my interest really had been that a lot of these, a lot of the tobacco farmers are smallholder farmers. So if they're changing to macadamia, it means these macadamia will be in these smallholder places where they will be directly neighboring subsistence crops. So pigeon pea, pumpkins, and whatever people grow also in small scale systems. So being an animal pollinated crop, the interest was really, okay, let's see what is it that is pollinating macadamia at the moment where the macadamia is being grown, and what and in the neighboring, and what sort of synergies do we see between these, are these crops flowering at the same time? Are they not? And all those kind of connections. And obviously for macadamia, it is largely managed by pesticides in the commercial state. And the largest plantations in Malawi at the moment are these big estates. So they heavily manage these macadamia by pesticides. And we don't know what exactly that, what does that mean for the community of insects and birds in those areas. So in terms of the research questions that we had here, we were, firstly, this first year really was an exploratory kind of work to just see what was there, because nobody had gone in and done this kind of work in these estates and smallholder farmers. So we really wanted to just go in and sort of look at what are the insects pollinating macadamia, how does that compare to literature? Because in other countries, South Africa, Australia, this has also been done. Are there any birds pollinating? What about pest predators? What type of insects are in there that are actually pest predators? The bird species as well. What are they? Are they birds feeding on common pests of macadamia, but also common pests of the neighboring subsistence farm crops? And then what is the impact of beehives? So a lot of these estates are putting in beehives in their macadamia estates. What does that do to the pollinator communities inside the estate, but also in the surrounding system? So those are the kind of questions that we want to look at, and preferably we would love to see these over a 2 or 3 season of data with it. So how we went about it for the birds, our sampling was transect walks. So we had, for the estates, there are 6 estates that we worked with. They all belong to the same sort of Eastern produce company. It was really mainly for, we would expect that they would be managed in the same way, in a way of how they use pesticides and how they do things in those estates. So basically, do a transect. The photo here shows you that it was never really a straight line, but we tried as much as possible to make it a straight line in the macadamia. So we'd have 2 inside the macadamia itself, and then 2 in the outside of the boundary where the subsistence crops would be. And then I haven't included much in this presentation because we also did 2 transects in subsistence farms. So, but that was later on in the year, and that information I haven't quite sorted yet. So we had 2 in subsistence farms. It will be slightly different in the smallholder farmers, because they grow their macadamia intercropped with other crops. So it's unlike here, where in the states where you have a full macadamia stand, huge area. In the smallholder farms, it's smaller pieces, trees here and there within their crops, other crops. So a different kind of habitat. So we obviously recorded all the birds that we saw and that we had in this estate where the birds were seen. We also documented the numbers that were seen. And then we also put a mist net line. This was usually on the edge of the estate and the subsistence farms to collect. So we catch the birds, leave them in a bag for a while, and then we collected the droppings for DNA and analysis in there. For the insects, we did standardized sweep nets along the transect. So they basically transect followed in a similar way that the birds were, but now stopping for 5 minutes at a specific tree, and then collecting the insects that the observer would find on the flower. Those insects that visited the flowers in that tree and collected. We also had collections using the aspirators. We had also planned to do these traps, just pan traps, but this didn't work out just because we weren't able to get them set in time. But so we simply did the aspirator collection. So this is where the aspirator would just be put in and around the tree where one had stopped for every insect that was there. Then collections for specific insect that came to the flower. And then these would then go to the museum for identification. Again, a lot of these, like I'll share here only the butterfly data because at least that majority of it has been done. But a lot of the other insects are out, some of them in South Africa and some are still at the museum for identification. The DNA, I will not go in details. I'm hoping some of you know. So this is going to be sequenced. So the idea was to sequence and look for the 5. We only isolated 5 of the common pests for macadamia and the subsistence crops that we recorded in the areas around the macadamia to check if these birds that we caught in the edge of the two were taking any of those known pests for those 2 areas. So what we found with regards to the birds, just in terms of the total numbers of species that were recorded, the buff area that I call it buffer area, which is the area going into the subsistence farms. So this was from the edge into the subsistence farms. Obviously had the highest numbers of birds, but not really different from the ones that we recorded right in the middle of the macadamia plantations themselves. And I think what will be more interesting, which is where we're going through as we're sorting our data, is the types of birds that we saw in here, in the 2. And another important thing was for the buffer areas, in some of the estates that there's a forest zone, because it will usually be maybe a riverine kind of boundary between the 2. So there's a lot of vegetation as you move out of the states going into the subsistence areas. We noted, of course, there was more habitat for birds on the estates than there was in the subsistence farms, but mainly they are cleared for the growth in there. At the moment, the data for that we collected for sequencing is still under processing, so that information is not yet available. In general, we had 24 transects in the estate. The 2 of the transects we ruled out because instead of the estate, the macadamia plantation having a boundary that was with a subsistence farmer, it was with tea. So there are some of these macadamia estates that are in the middle of tea estates. So these, I think, do not really be comparable to what we were looking for, which was between when we are moving from macadamia into the tea estates. A total of about 137 species, I think my numbers are right there, were recorded, 76 in the macadamia, and I think this one, sorry, I didn't updated this slide, in the macadamia and in the buffer. Obviously, the buffer has a little bit more than 87, 68 now. In terms of the types of species, the most common bird was the yellow-fronted canary, which is the one in the picture there. You found it in 21 of the 22 transects, so almost each and every transect. Didn't matter whether you were in macadamia or in subsistence areas, you found this particular bird. But when we look at the data separately, you find that when you look at macadamia alone, actually the yellow white-eye, which is an insectivorous bird, was more common in the macadamia and while this one, the canary, still remained most common in the subsistence farm areas. And then when we looked at the insects, so this just says, so in terms of the groups of insects, so before we go into them being identified, had quite a lot of different types of insects that came to the macadamia flowers, but also the crops. So in the subsistence farms, the main crops that were there was beans, pumpkins, and pigeon pea. This is Kajana Skajana, I don't know if you know it. That was there, but overall, obviously, the bees were highly represented, Apis mellifera being the most common bee. But when you take, I think the most interesting thing about bees are being also going through the identification, but there was a number of wild bees apart from Apis mellifera, which dominated, and a wide range of other different types of insects that came to the flowers. So in terms of this is just the different representation, looking at the estates, the subsistence farms, and the smallholders in terms of what it is, how those were spread between those two. So I think for us, this particular graph, what was obvious when we were in the field and collecting this information, it was very clear for the butterflies. I felt that we saw more butterflies in the smallholder farms, which are the intercropped farms, than we did in any of the estates or their neighboring subsistence farms. But when we looked at this graph, especially for estates and the smallholder farm, we just looked at this, that they didn't look to differ much in there, which was a bit surprising. So when we looked a little bit more closer at the butterfly data, and then looked at the families. So as I said, the butterflies, at least a lot of them could be identified up to family levels within the country. Then you saw the kind of difference that is there. So in what we thought we saw more butterflies, but what we saw were the papilio type butterflies, which were a lot more in the subsistence, so the smallholder farms in a way than we did. So this is the colorful, especially the colorful greenish, big kind of butterfly. And from people that know more about insects, a lot of people say to me, "Oh no, but that is a butterfly that is also known to be pests. The larva is the caterpillar is a pest to many of the." So this is an interesting, or something that I would like to explore further. It did link in a little bit with what we found generally with the macadamia, the smallholder macadamia farmers, that a lot of their crop never makes it to export because of the quality of the nut, and it will have these borers. Many of them might be from these kind of pests for them, and because they don't apply as much pesticides as do the estates, these butterflies, I guess they found more and then not. But yeah, again, it would be interesting to hear from those that know more about these farmers. So as I said, I'm putting recommendations here. This is information that we are exploring. What I would really like is we will go back into the field this year and collect this information again and see and then sort of put it together and start to see what kind of trends and patterns are taking place with regards to these things in the plantations, in the farms, in macadamia farms. But in terms of some of the information that we put out or recommendations even after this first work was about the documentation. Because working in the farms, even with the smallholders or the subsisters, we see that there's a lot of work being done to document pests. So most farmers have been trained to at least be able to document the pest species that are found in their farm. And I thought, like, this is also something that could be done for pollinators, for the same crops in there, as well as the macadamia farms. At the moment, for Malawi, the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan are going to be going under review very soon. And we did put out just a notice to say that I think mobilizing data for pollinators should be one of the key items that they should include in this plan, in their strategy and action plan, to make sure that we start to understand a little bit more about this about these in our agricultural systems than we currently do. And then the creation of habitats. So I think if you notice, especially for the smallholders, the number of species of birds, it's around 38 compared to the 100-somethings we are seeing in the other places. And largely it is because, there's no really, when you go into the smallholders, there's not really a lot of habitat for birds around the agriculture spaces. A lot of it would be that monocrop and everything is cut down and not creating this. And this could be that they are, probably affecting the possible ecosystem services that these would have by not having these places in place. And just another sort of finding that was outside what we were looking for really, but having gone out there and worked with these farmers, and obviously we had to talk to them about what we are doing and why we're doing it. We found there's a lot of expansion for commercial farms. A lot of the commercial farms are expanding their macadamia space. So obviously there must be good market and they know this is a good investment. However, when you look at the smallholder farmers, they are very, very disgruntled, especially to do with the price they get for their nuts, and many of it is, as I mentioned, because of the quality of the nut, because they usually are impacted by borers and things like that. So the quality of the nut is not export standards, and usually they are left out, and they have to sort of try and sell internally. But even the internal market, they haven't really been explored much, because I think, like, we had the farmer that the picture I have here, he had like this 30 bags of macadamia nut that they're just going bad now because he had nowhere to sell, and the local market, it's like they don't work with the local market, with the smallholder farmers, and also there's no knowledge of the fact that apart from exporting the macadamia, there is other things that they do. People use it for animal feed and all these other things that they could sell it, but the information is just simply not there. And I think they lose a lot also because within the community where they do smallholder farming, there is no machine for cracking the nut, and they are forced to send their nuts very far away which is expensive, and then they are cracked, and then they are told, oh, there's no quality nut for sale. So yeah, it was for me, it was just a different experience, because I found, this is an issue, it's happening in the country, but nobody's really talking about it. And I think it's something that for us, at least as a university, we're like, I think we need to shed light on this, both for the farmers to know their options, but also maybe for government or NGOs to really try and do some more investments in the smallholder farmers who want to go into this crop, in terms of how they can manage this. So I think that's all I had to say. Maybe just before I say thank you, this one slide, one other thing that we're hoping to do this year is so during this study, we only looked at the day insects and the day birds. But I know that the nocturnal insects are also as important, and also with regards to pest predation, there's a lot of studies that have been done that bats are quite an important pest predator in macadamia. And we hope that in this next season, we will be able to collect information about bats in this system in the same way as we have done for the beds. So yeah, with that, thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, Madame Tiwonge Mzumara-Gawa, docteur en biologie, est aussi une activiste qui s'intéresse à la relation entre les insectes, les oiseaux et les cultures. Et elle a commencé un travail très intéressant. C'est un travail en cours, donc des données uniquement d'une seule saison pour le moment, où il s'agit d'étudier les relations entre justement les insectes et les cultures, du point de vue, d'une part, les insectes en tant que ravageurs, mais aussi les insectes en tant que prédateurs de ravageurs et en tant que pollinisateurs. Alors, le Malawi dépend grandement d'insectes pollinisateurs, surtout en ce qui concerne les plantations de macadamia. Macadamia est maintenant très fortement poussé au Malawi pour remplacer les cultures de tabac, ce que je trouve personnellement une très bonne idée. Mais justement, ces plantations dépendent alors de pollinisateurs. Mais il y a aussi les ravageurs, et maintenant il s'agit d'étudier les populations qui sont d'une part un danger pour les cultures, les insectes ravageurs, mais aussi les insectes utiles et aussi les oiseaux qui sont en partie des prédateurs d'insectes ravageurs, mais naturellement aussi des prédateurs d'insectes utiles. Et quelle pourrait aussi être la solution en augmentant la présence de ruchiers d'abeilles. Alors, les méthodes qui ont été utilisées, il s'agit d'une part d'étudier les oiseaux. Des transects ont été organisés à travers les différentes cultures, 2 dans des cultures de macadamia, 2 dans des cultures adjacentes, des petites cultures de jardinage, d'agriculture de subsistance. Et aussi, on a capturé des oiseaux dans les filets et gardé les fientes pour des analyses génétiques ultérieures. Quant aux insectes, on les a capturés au filet aussi, les filets que l'on passe au-dessus des cultures, et aussi par observation directe et en utilisant des aspirateurs. Et là aussi, on prévoit des analyses génétiques plus tard. Alors, parmi les résultats, il est intéressant de noter que les oiseaux sont un peu plus nombreux, les espèces d'oiseaux sont un peu plus nombreuses dans les fermes de subsistance que dans les cultures de macadamia, et ça s'explique naturellement parce que dans les petites cultures de subsistance, les petites fermes dans jardinage, le nombre d'habitats différents pour les oiseaux sont plus nombreux que dans les cultures de macadamia qui sont plus homogènes. Sur 24 transectes établis, on a observé 137 espèces d'oiseaux. Et parmi ces espèces d'oiseaux, une espèce est particulièrement répandue et nombreuse. Elle domine pratiquement la vie faune. C'est le canari à front jaune, je l'ai pas, oui, canari à front jaune. J'espère que je traduis ce nom à peu près correctement. Mais on observe aussi le yellow white-eye, par exemple, qui est aussi, alors à ce moment-là, un insectivore que l'on trouve assez communément. Parmi les insectes, dans les jardins de légumes, par exemple, où on a plusieurs cultures de végétation, différents types de végétation, de production pour la consommation, il y a plus d'abeilles et plus d'insectes aussi que dans les cultures de macadamia. Par contre, les papillons sont bien représentés dans les cultures de macadamia, et là, il s'agit vraisemblablement d'espèces qui sont susceptibles d'entrer en considération comme ravageurs. Alors, de ces études ont été produit quelques recommandations. Il s'agit de suivre les effectifs des pollinisateurs autant que des ravageurs. Donc, il ne faut pas seulement se concentrer sur l'identification des ravageurs qui peuvent être un danger pour ces cultures de macadamia, mais il faut aussi tenir compte des pollinisateurs et des insectes qui sont capables de prédater ces ravageurs. Il faut aussi récolter des données sur les pollinisateurs selon les directives qui ont été établies par la Convention sur la diversité biologique, les NBSAPS, donc les National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, en français les plans d'action et les stratégies de la biodiversité, donc que les différents pays sont censés établir. Et une recommandation importante aussi consiste à promouvoir la création d'habitats pour les oiseaux dans et autour des cultures et particulièrement des cultures de macadamia, de manière à augmenter la diversité et à augmenter le nombre d'espèces potentiellement utiles pour, d'une part, tenir de contrôler peut-être les ravageurs dans ces cultures. Il y a aussi eu quelques petits effets, résultats en marge de cette mission. On constate donc que macadamia est une culture qui est en essor au Malawi, mais il semble que les prix que les producteurs peuvent obtenir sur le marché ne sont pas assez en rapport avec l'effort qui est consenti pour ces cultures, et donc il s'agirait d'assister les petits producteurs. On pourrait par exemple les assister en leur mettant à disposition des machines pour casser les noix, ce qui leur permettrait de produire de manière plus efficace. Et donc, les études vont continuer, et à titre personnel, je félicite vivement Dr Tiwonge pour ces études commencées et qui semblent très prometteuses. Merci.